1 minute and 13 seconds. That's how long it took to go from hero to zero. That's how long it took for my marriage to go from bliss to utter crap. At least that's what the phone screen read. 1:13. I looked at my friends, Brad and Julie Carmody. Julie's look expressed guilt, remorse, and pity. Brad's was utter shock. They say people's mouths sag, and his lower jaw was exactly that. As he struggled to say something, anything at all, I made a decision. I have to go, I said, and turned away, suddenly embarrassed beyond belief. Oh, no, you don't! Julie shouted back at me. You're not going anywhere without us. We're not leaving you alone right now. Next chapter. Brad and Julie had been good friends for the past 2 years. Brad for longer than that. I'd known Brad since high school. He played football for his high school, just like me. Then we ended up at Central Michigan together, but we played basketball as players. I made it to halfway through my sophomore year before I ran out of money. I realized college wasn't for me, so I dropped out and moved back to our small town. I then got a job with the Department of Public Works and decided to get an associate's degree at the local community college. Brad completed the 2-year degree in almost 3 years. We kept in touch after I left, and he came to visit us on vacations. Christy worked as a cocktail server for a friend of mine. A friend because he owned a bar in suburban Detroit, and I spent a fair amount of money there. Jimmy owned the Burning Barn, a great little bar that had a stage and live entertainment 5 nights a week. Except for a bottom tooth sticking out a little sideways, Christy was a goddess in every way. And her smile made her even cuter. I called it a chubby smile, and combined with the cute wrinkles at the corners of her mouth, it was simply intoxicating. Despite her effect on me, I stayed away from her. I knew the owner and the rest of the staff and spent many evenings sitting behind the bar just chatting and getting to know them. Christy was usually one of the 2 servers on duty, and Jimmy loved it. Just enough service and slow enough to keep the consumption down, reducing the likelihood of drunken altercations. I wasn't looking for love. I'd already had that, sort of, in high school. For the last 3 years before graduation, Stacy and I hadn't broken up. She'd told me so since our first date, but I always assumed we had something special. But after graduation, Stacy bought a new car gift from her parents and found a summer job before heading off to the University of Wisconsin. We both decided to end the relationship, so neither of us would be hurt by the other, but hoped to remain friends. No, I was at the bar to hunt. In college, I had my own distractions too. I knew sooner or later I'd meet a girl I wanted to settle down with. So now or never, I had to sow all those wild oats. There were plenty of oats. Every once in a while, I'd drop in on a pretty girl. Sometimes I would sit at the bar and wait for an unlucky girl to come up to me. Over the course of the evening, many of them would run out of luck and approach me. My success rate was over 50%, so I guess I had a right to gloat. A year after I started hanging out there, I stopped for gas at a late-night gas station after the bar closed. As I was finishing up, Christy pulled up. We chatted for a few minutes. Honestly, I was the one chatting because she was busy flirting. Because of the cold fall temperatures, we decided to stop for water and air, and I hopped in the car with her. We talked for a bit, and then she seemed to get concerned. "Why don't you ever come near me?" she asked bluntly. "Well," I mewed, "probably because you work for Jimmy, and I'm not there to cause trouble." "Okay," she said, stretching the word like she wasn't sure of my answer. "How about you take me out to dinner Friday night? Jimmy doesn't own my free time, and I promise I won't bite." There goes that damn smile. I'd probably cancel my vacation to ask her out. Sitting so close to her, even in the morning darkness, I saw plenty of good reasons to ask her out. Christy turned out to be more petite than I had anticipated. After dinner that first Friday night, Christy wanted to go out. She spared no words, although she didn't say, "Let's go out and have fun." We went to my apartment and got right into it. At the bar the next 3 times I was there, instead of seeking me out, she tried her best to avoid me. Finally, I cornered her as she was coming out of the restroom. "What the hell, Christy?" I asked her. What did I do to make you treat me like shit? Me? She replied sanctimoniously. I didn't think you liked me. She wasn't looking into my eyes, but at my crotch. I can tell when I'm not wanted. Jesus! I looked at her like she was crazy. That has nothing to do with it. I wanted to get to know you better. Not all that superficial shit we talk about at dinner. Maybe just relax, you know? Not this bam 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 bam, thanks, Mom. I feel like you're in a hurry to get somewhere. Like I'm on the clock. Christy's gaze softened considerably, but she looked guilty. She was looking anywhere but at me, clearly trying to think of what to say next. Yeah, she apologized. About that. Look, I like you. You're handsome and funny. You know, you have a good sense of humor. The third time was a success, but after our late-night conversation, it almost didn't happen. I didn't want to become a stepfather, and I was already wary of her. We took our time, did everything right. After that, she started calling me instead of just waiting for me to show up at her workplace. Christy and I went out 3 more times before the end of the month, and on my birthday, we went to a nice restaurant. When we got into my car after the meal, she looked at me with puppy dog eyes and asked, "Why don't we go to a bar and do a little dancing before we drive to your place?" "Why would you want to do that?" I asked, surprised. "I mean, you spend 5 nights a week there." "I know," she said, looking down. "But the Saboteurs are playing tonight. I like their music. You know I'm not allowed to dance while I'm working a shift. Just for a little while, please?" The whole thing was too weird. Not her question, but the way she got into character. Aggressiveness replaced passivity at the snap of her fingers. It didn't take me long to capitulate, though. Luckily, we found a table. It was only 9, and since we were there for an early dinner, there were still a few tables available. The establishment was filling up fast. We ordered drinks, and Christy's coworker began berating her for not being able to stay away. A few minutes later, Christy and I found ourselves on the dance floor. I knew this band well, as they performed at the Burning Barn about once every 90 days. They were good too. The lead singer was a short guy with a shaggy haircut. He looked like an American boy, except for his creepy mustache. It annoyed me a little that he kept staring at Christy. He was singing at full blast, the band was belting out a fast rock song, and still he kept his eyes on her sitting on the floor. She was looking at him too, until it hit her that she was dancing with me. We danced through about 6 songs in a row, and I was already hoping for a slow one when the band called a 15-minute break. Christy and I went back to our table, mostly to make sure it was still there, and then I headed to the restroom. By then, I'd made it through about 3 songs. When I came back, Christy was nowhere to be seen. I sat down at a table, and Christy's coworker walked by and stopped to ask if we were ready for another drink. I was overheated and ordered a beer and a glass of water, then told her to bring Christy another shot of whatever was in her glass. When she came back about 5 minutes later, Christy was still nowhere to be found. I asked if the server had seen her, and her nervous response was very inappropriate. I think I saw her leaving for the ladies." Janie and I knew each other, as did the rest of the staff. We weren't that friendly, but I knew her well enough to realize she was hiding something. "Oh, maybe she's not feeling well," I suggested, trying to give myself a look of ignorance. "You know, too much desert on top of the alcohol." She was out of there like a shot. I stood up, leaned my chair against the table with the back inward, and began to methodically search the bar. If we weren't sitting near the back room, at one end of the long bar, I probably would have started in a different direction. Instead, I peeked behind the door and saw nothing. I was about to continue when I heard Mr. Leadsinger's voice. "Shit, baby," he said tiredly. "That was shit." I leaned back in my chair and took a few steps into the well-lit room. Christy was kneeling in front of Davy Vick, the voice of the Saboteurs. "Say, baby," he smiled and wiped her chin with his index finger, pulling it aside. "Why don't you tell your lover you're not feeling well and meet me here after last call? I have what you need." She rose uncertainly, but answered nothing. "Yes," he continued. "Kiss him on the lips and tell him to take you home. Meet me here in, say, 2 hours. No, she answered quickly. I can't go back. You see my son. Oh, well. He didn't look all that disappointed. Thanks for the birthday present. It was the best one ever. He turned to walk out the same door I was standing in, and I froze in place. Oh, shit, he exclaimed. Christy turned to look at me. She looked dejected, maybe depressed, but not scared or worried or pissed off like I expected. Back off and die, Christy, I said as loudly as I could as I turned and walked back out to the bar. I'm sure a few people even heard me over the rumble of pre-recorded rock music. I was walking forward quickly when I heard Davy. Yahoo! Christie's is back on sale. I spun around on the spot, intending to punch him in the face, but the scuzzy little asshole had already walked out the same door and moved through the crowd toward the stage. The owner was a tough son of a bitch. He had to be, since he owned a pretty rowdy bar that only had bouncers absent on weekends. He intercepted me as I headed for the door. What's going on? He asked, but I think he knew. I have to go, was all I said as I tried to get around his huge figure. Relax, Joey, he said, putting a calm, friendly hand on my shoulder. You don't have to go off half-cocked like that. Don't worry about it, I said, looking up at him. I only had one drink. He was looking over my shoulder at something or someone. I turned and saw that Christy had stopped 10 feet behind me. The band had started playing again, and there was no way I could strike up a conversation with Jimmy. Angie, a girl I went to high school with, happened to walk by. It was an opportune moment. Hi, Ange, I said quickly, gently taking her by the elbow. Do you want to dance? She looked surprised, but let me lead her to the floor. While I calmed myself down, Angie and I danced to a fast song, and then the goddamn band finally played a slow one, probably on purpose. Angie was a little drunk and pressed herself against me. I let her do that and also took a few liberties with my hands. I sincerely hoped she didn't come with a date or, heaven forbid, a boyfriend. When the song ended, I gave her a kiss and we left the dance floor. Christy, an expert at navigating a crowded room, caught up with me before I could get close to the door. I'm sorry, she said, reaching for me. I yanked my hand away. Don't you dare touch me, bitch, I growled. Joey, I said I'm sorry, she tried again. You shouldn't have seen that. I laughed in her face. Really? So you're sorry you got caught, not that you were having fun with that bastard while you were here with me. What the hell, Christy? At least her face flushed a little. It's his birthday, too, she said, as if it was perfectly normal. And I've known him a lot longer than you have. Oh, that explains it, I told her sarcastically. Silly me. She threw me a dirty look, crazy bitch. I couldn't help myself. Now that we've cleared that up, I continued to rage at her. I'm going home. If you had told me how close you two were, I would have found something else to do on my birthday, and you could have spent the night with him. I could have. She started and stopped. Yes, I understand you're upset. Please don't be mad at me. I didn't want to be with him. I wanted to be with you. I promised him, you know. But I want to be with you. Please take me back to your apartment so I can show you. No, I said with insistence. You told me you wanted to go dancing, so what? Can you fulfill your little promise to him? And then you're going to do it right in the back room where anyone who works here can see you? You may work here, but these people are my friends. We're my friends, I guess. I can never show my face in this place again, you goddamn whore. I don't know why women who act like whores always look like they've been slapped when someone calls them out, but she did. What did you just say? She asked indignantly. Probably telling the truth. I grinned and spit out my words, getting right in her face. The first thing a whore does is lose her hearing. Christy wanted to slap me, but I had already shown her back. I walked out and got in the car. She didn't follow me. I stayed away from the bar for 4 days. Christy left several messages on my answering machine saying the same thing. She was sorry. Couldn't she make it up to me? Delusional bitch. 4 days later, I opened the door and found a man I had never seen there. He was well dressed in a suit. He had a serious look. "Yes," I said. "May I help you?" He stood for a long time, sizing me up. "Yes, you little asshole," he replied calmly, but with venom. "You're entertaining my wife, and it has to stop." I was too shocked to say anything. He was waiting for me. "I don't know what you're talking about. Who the hell are you?" With his left hand, he pulled a photograph from his lapel pocket, and with his right, he simultaneously flipped his jacket open, exposing a holstered pistol. "My name is Raymond Crane," he said. "My wife is Christy, and you need to back off or I'll make you." He put his right hand on the gun. "I can destroy you right here," he declared. "And I'll have a damn good chance of beating you, since I'm a deputy district attorney." He seemed to want to make it conscious. "Christine has a condition. You're compounding the problem, asshole. Stay away so your father and I can get her help. Don't call her. Don't answer her calls. Don't talk to her at her work." His demeanor was getting angrier by the second. I thought he was going to explode and shoot me. He brought me back to reality. "Nod your goddamn head if you understand me, you little goddamn freak." I nodded. He turned without saying a word and walked away. When he got into his expensive car, I closed the door and sank into the chair. I had just avoided the missile and heeded his warning. A week later, Christy approached me at the bar, and I asked her to send another waitress. "I know Ray came to see you," she said, ignoring my request. "He's lying, you know. We were married, but we're divorced now. We have a son together. He's controlling me. Don't pay any attention to him." "Christy," I replied, "even if he doesn't, it's over between us. Your disrespect for that singer was enough." "Oh, I see," she began, her emotions instantly flipping. "Your little male ego can't handle the fact that there are other men in my life. That's fine. You're just a little boy." It wasn't necessary to answer, though there was a lot I wanted to say. Besides, I believed her husband. I found a new bar I frequented. After that, I reconnected with Brad on social media. We immediately organized some fun activities that we both enjoyed. He organized a consistent racquetball game time on Saturdays, and afterwards we would go to the bar across the street to have a few beers and watch football. I organized a camping and fly fishing trip, which was the most fun I'd had in a while. Brad knew my story about Christy. He had become familiar enough to get in a lot of barbs, and I had gotten to the point where I could even laugh at them. My newfound love of country music and rhythm and blues brought a lot of ridicule. I lost my love of rock and especially cover bands. I also rarely went on dates, preferring to fill my time with more important pursuits. But then he met Julie. Shortly after that, I met Catherine. To everyone, she was Cat, so that's what I called her too. She struck me at first sight. Her striking beauty was the first to catch my attention in a long time. The little club Julie and Brad dragged me to was hosting a Jack Johnson-type performer who was actually very good. It was my turn to buy drinks at the bar because the place was packed and the servers were too busy. As I turned around carrying 3 drinks, I bumped into her, spilling beer and whiskey all over her blouse. She shrieked from the cold, then just stared at me. "I'm so sorry," I shouted through the music. "Your top is all wet. I'll pay to have it cleaned." She must have liked something about me, because her anger instantly subsided. "You bet you will," she replied smartly. "You're just lucky I dropped my friends off here and there's another top in the car. Where are you sitting because you owe me a drink when I get back?" I bought her that drink as well. After that, I couldn't concentrate on the tune because I could see where she was sitting with her girlfriends. "Go talk to her," Julie said in my ear, lightly poking me in the ribs. "She's already let you buy her drinks and seems sympathetic to your incident." I felt obligated. No, that wasn't even close to being true. Cat was intoxicating. I hadn't been able to stop watching her, couldn't take my eyes off her, since I'd bumped into her 40 minutes ago. Cat introduced her friends, and while I stuttered and stammered, she quickly went back to chatting with her friends. A slow song played, and I stood up for the second time in as many minutes. "Would you like to dance?" I grumbled, trying to make my voice deeper. I think she felt annoyed at first, but then she studied my face and smiled. Her friends giggled. Admittedly, the dance was pretty awkward. I was failing and I knew it. But I rallied. I slowed down to the point where we were just spinning in tiny circles and started asking her questions about her life. After we started talking, we found a quiet booth across from the bar, and things took a turn for the better. Kat was smart, a little sassy, and seemed to be putting the world on its ear. I was so blown away that I could have listened to her all night without saying a word to myself. I took her number and left a very happy man. Julie and Brad teased me all the way home. The next few months went by like a whirlwind. I felt almost from the beginning that Kat and I were going to be together for a very long time and, I hoped, forever. All the best things about her also enthralled me. Even when she was moody or irritable, I giggled to myself. The funny thing was that it usually brought her out of that mood. Kat had a marketing degree from Western Michigan. She had a well-paying, lucrative job at a mid-sized advertising agency that she loved. She lived closer to Detroit, while I still dwelt on the outskirts. My job in the city had already earned me a promotion and a raise. That didn't mean we didn't have disagreements. As much as Kat was businesslike at work, she was a free bird in her personal life. I can't say she was self-centered because I never saw her as malicious. More often than not, she took my thoughts and feelings into consideration. She liked fine art and was quite good at it. My artistic style was reserved exclusively for wall coverings. Kat would buy me all sorts of portraits and sculptures to decorate my apartment. Kat loved cats, I know, ironic, and I loved dogs. She told me she wanted exactly 2 children 2 years apart. I, on the other hand, was hoping for 3 or 4. Her diet and exercise programs were very different from mine. And there were a few things we disagreed on by a wide margin. I felt we should have a joint account after we got married. And yes, I proposed at 10 months. Kat said yes. She wanted separate checking accounts. We came to a compromise that we would have 2 separate joint accounts, one for household bills and one for a vacation fund. The biggest yet least significant issue was her love of rock music. That's not to say that her choice of music was highly specialized. She liked classic rock, some metal, and even a few techno rock bands. Her favorite band was the Green River Band. They were a local band from the Midwest that had gained national fame a year ago thanks to 2 big hits. Whenever she talked about what they had to overcome in their climb to the top, I reminded her of Bob Seger, Ted Nugent, and even Eminem. It always ended in a stalemate. She knew my history with Christy and would often pester me with questions about boycotting rock and roll just because of that one incident. I always answered the same thing. I don't know why, and I was open to the idea that my brain would eventually separate the 2 things. We were married for 2 years, and life was great. Honestly, I couldn't imagine it could be better. We hung out with Brad and Julie a few times a week. Julie and Kat had become friends, and they were always planning things, including fishing trips for us guys. One day I came home to a very happy wife. She was absolutely thrilled when she showed me the tickets. Her marketing firm had been hired by the manager of the Green River Band, and in exchange, she was able to get 4 tickets. Not just any tickets, but backstage tickets for the entire concert. Why would we stand next to a huge amplifier and stare at the musicians' backs while they perform? She looked at me like I was crazy. Because, she said thoughtfully, probably trying not to lose her temper, we'll actually be right on stage with them. Oh my God, it's so exciting. I can barely stand it. She was beyond excited, no doubt about it. All the next week I hinted that I might not go. She insisted. It took her 3 days to take off her rose-colored glasses and realize that I was completely serious about not wanting to go. Why? She answered my question with a question of her own. Because you're my husband, and you love me enough to go with you. She implied, if you love me enough. So I finally gave in, or gave up, depending. Brad and Julie were just as excited as Kat was. We got to the concert a little early, or rather, very early. Kat was hoping to see some of the band members and maybe get an autograph. We were guaranteed that, but on the glossy autograph that everyone else was getting. The concert was at Ford Field, and we were directed to a separate parking lot because of backstage passes. Kat was in her element, dancing like crazy with Julie right off the stage. The girls tried to share the excitement with Brad and me, getting us to dance along with them. When the band played their last two songs, a new encore format that most bands follow, Kat was beyond ecstatic to their hit song, Pocket Rocket. The lead singer of the band was Ted Springer. I'd never liked him or the band's music, even before Christy and I got together. That's not true. I hated him. He was all egotistical, hot-headed asshole who was bad at rock and roll. Thad was an arrogant bastard in my eyes, and the ridiculous tattoo adorning the entire left side of his face pretty much proved it. And then there was that stupid red cape. Springer was dressed as some combo of Rod Stewart and David Bowie, remade for Halloween. Shortly after their song, he looked back at our group of 20 audience members backstage and smiled when he saw my wife and Julie doing it. He made a motion with his head toward one of the assistant directors, and a guy in a headset and carrying a clipboard immediately came over to us. He said something in both Julie and Kat's ears, and they nearly jumped out of their skin. Without even looking at me, Kat followed the man straight to the stage. Julie at least cast a glance at Brad over her shoulder as she followed Kat. Thad danced with the women, letting them do most of the work. When the song ended, the crowd went wild. For the last song, the band chose another big hit, the ballad, You Were the Soul of Me. He serenaded our women, even running the back of his palm over Kat's cheek. My wife looked like she was in a trance, and that's when I first got my first bad feeling. The song ended with a big, dazzling light show erupting on the final chord. Our wives were led off stage, from the other side of the stage. I looked over at Brad. He had the same anxious look on his face as I did. The applause went on and on. The band walked off in the same direction as Kat and Julie. Just then, the lights came on in the hall. We were all standing behind a small barrier. I figured it was to keep us out of sight of the many cameras that were recording what was going on. I stepped forward and one of the guards noticed me. "Hey, you can't go out there," he commanded. "One of the concierges will escort you back the way you came in." "My wife was in there," I told him. "She and my friend's wife were let out that way." I pointed to the stage. "Where should we go to wait for them?" The pitying looks we both received only added to my unease. "There's a stage exit door over there," he pointed to the opposite side of the arena, next to what looked like the tunnel our football team used at halftime. Brad and I made our way through the auditorium, resisting the flow of the crowd like fish swimming through the current. By the time we were on what we thought was the other side of the stadium, most people had already left. I backed up into the aisle every now and then to get a landmark. After several failed attempts, we finally ran into a security officer who led us through the aisle, down the stairs to the field, and past a gate that we would never have known about had it not been for his instructions. Half an hour after our wives left the stage, we found ourselves in a concrete tunnel, waiting for them and wondering if we had missed them in the commotion. Neither of the women were answering their phones, so Brad and I did the only logical thing. We stayed put. We watched anxiously and tensely as the exit with two doors closed. Several people, mostly women, came out through those doors, and when we asked, they confirmed that they were part of the band's entourage or photo shoot. Finally, after another 45 minutes, the door opened again, and this time Julie came out of it. Brad looked both very angry and relieved at the same time. It was probably these feelings that made him freeze in place instead of moving into his wife's arms. After all, she was the one who had initiated this contact. "Where's Kat?" There was no emotion in my voice. I was too exhausted to show emotion. That would come later. Brad looked at Julie, and Julie looked at me. Her facial expression told me too much without revealing any details. She left. The pause between those two simple words caused a lump in her throat that almost made her expel the demon or swallow it back. I thought she was going to throw up. She left you a message, Julie said, pulling her phone, Kat's phone, out of her little clutch and holding it out to me. Brad suddenly found his voice. What do you mean she's gone? He asked incredulously. She was with you. Fear appeared on Julie's face. She already knew she would have to explain this to Brad and me. Far more concerning to her was the question of how to tell her husband. I tried, she told Brad. Then, turning to me, I tried. By then, I had already opened my wife's cell phone. What am I supposed to be looking for? I asked her with insistence. Perhaps there was still time to stop what was happening. Julie told me to look at the last video on her camera. I found it and pressed play. I'm making this video, she began, because I don't have time to tell you everything in person. I'm sorry, it's only partly true. I'm afraid to do it this way. She paused, but regained her determined look. The band has asked me, Thad, to go with them on the rest of their Midwest tour. That's 4 more concerts. Joey, I have to do it. I want to do it. I'll never get another chance like this. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I know what I look like. I know we're married and that our marriage could suffer. I think I know what you'll be thinking about while I'm gone, too. Please don't dwell on it. I can't explain it all now, but I'll be home in 2 weeks, give or take a day, and I'll explain it all to you then, I promise. I gave Julie my rings because I love you, and I want you to put them back on my finger when I get back. I also promise right now that I will never do anything like that again. I love you. I know you're looking and wondering if it's a lie, but it's not. I'll be ready to prove it to you. Someone knocked on the door, presumably a small closet-like room, and she said louder, I'll be right there. She turned to the camera again. I love you, Joey. Please don't worry, everything will be fine. I'll see you in a few weeks. The video stopped. I looked at the screen in complete shock. The time was showing 1:13. 1 minute and 13 seconds to ruin everything I thought we had. Next chapter. Brad and Julie, as promised, got me home safely. Over the course of a few beers, they talked nonstop about Kat and the concert, but it didn't help. Can we change the subject, please? Sourly I asked. They tried, and so did I, but it only resulted in silence. The concert and my wife's incredible acrimony was all we could think about. After that, I told them they could go home and I was off to bed, since the next day was a work day. And that was good. I needed the distraction, and it had been a busy day. That night, at almost 6 o'clock, my sister walked into my apartment. I talked to her over dinner and explained what had happened. Elena was my big sister and the guiding force in my life. I knew she would give me perspective and something to think about. Unexpectedly, Stacy, my high school friend, followed her into my house. Elena had befriended Stacy in high school when we were dating, and they remained friends after college. They bought some gourmet sandwiches from a little store we frequented. What do you think you'd like to do? Asked Elena, after I laid out the details of the previous night and showed her the video of it. I honestly don't know, I shrugged. If I had to make a decision right now, it would be divorce. Elena and Stacy nodded slowly. I could tell by the look on their faces that they agreed with me. But then Elena surprised me. Well, let's break it down, she said like a mother. Let's start with the fact that Kat didn't plan this in advance. Wait, I interrupted. I don't know that for sure. She plans everything. She's an organizer in general. She got the tickets through her job, and while it seems legit on the surface, I don't know that she didn't plan to go backstage. Yeah, she thought. But neither she nor Julie had any idea that Thad Springer was going to drag them on stage. I had to agree. Then I thought about what would likely follow. I'm more concerned that she might have backed out. Instead, she jumped at the chance, forgetting about her marriage. I don't know either, Joey, she said hesitantly. She was thinking about you and her marriage in the video she made, clearly trying to minimize the damage, but still aware of it. I contemplated how to refute that, and then Stacy filled the silence, finally speaking up. If she thought she could assuage your hurt feelings, she paused, though By telling you about it before the fact? Well, maybe? She fell silent. There was a long silence while we all pondered. Finally, I spoke up. Yeah, whatever, I began. She's gone. She's off on her great adventure, which no doubt includes having fun with that nasty bastard, Thad Springer, repeatedly for 2 weeks. I don't see any way to forget it. Elena stood up and poured us all a drink. Apparently, they'd gone to the liquor store, too. She set a whiskey and Coke in front of me and asked, not to be rude, but can you tell me what goes through a guy's mind when he cheats? I mean the act of cheating itself, how it goes through your mind. Is the woman who is supposed to belong to you somehow tainted or dirty? In a way, I answered easily. I suppose my imagination works just the same as any other guy or woman's. There's also the anatomy and the fact that he would ejaculate into her. But to me, it's more of a violation of her vows. She made a promise when we got married. I felt uncomfortable having this conversation in the presence of my ex. I guessed she reciprocated me because she blushed. The fact that she was doing it with another man is a deal breaker for you. That's for sure, said Elena. Stacy seemed eager to speak up. But it's not just some other guy, it's Thad entertaining Springer, right? Again, whatever, I said. Some random guy or Springer. In fact, it could be worse. Because he's a celebrity? Stacy was fishing. I mean, as she said, the opportunity of a lifetime. Not for me, I replied. Let's say he's really good, you know. And that's quite likely, considering what a celebrity he is. How can any husband compete with her memories? I don't really like the idea of spending the rest of my life having fun with just one man who's almost always thinking about what she did with that asshole. That made Stacy grimace. I guess the male point of view gave her a lot to think about. One more thing, Elena cut in. What about getting even? Would it help you move on if you had fun with someone else? For a moment, I thought my sister was suggesting Stacy. Not at all, I said firmly. 2 wrongs don't make a right. The conversation turned to what I planned to do while she was gone, how I would keep my sanity, and what I might need from both of them. I watched Stacy lean forward in her chair, tensely awaiting my answer. The next night, Stacy returned without my sister. We ate pizza and reminisced about better times. Stacy told me about her time in college. I told her about how sports had stalled in my decision to leave the university. We talked about our jobs and what we liked about them. When we were talking and about to doze off, we announced the evening. Stacy, I suggested, if you're as tired as you look, I have a spare room. She looked at me, sizing me up. No, she said. I'm fine. I'm just rolling down the window. She grinned, seeming proud that she'd managed to contain herself. Can I come over tomorrow night? She asked, gathering her purse. Or maybe we could go to a movie. We ended up going to the movies. The next night was Friday, and I took her to the Italian restaurant where we had our first date. Afterward, we walked hand in hand along the river. As I was dropping her off at her house, I leaned in for a kiss and she didn't bother to stop me. Sunday was the first day I didn't see anyone. Brad and Julie called to check on me, but we ended up discussing the day's football schedule and the surprise winners and how our fantasy players had performed. Julie told me she was glad I wasn't sulking on my alcohol. Stacy and I resumed our Tuesday meetings and every other day that week. We revived a lot of things that we had left undone after the breakup. I didn't see Elena, although she called several times to check on me. I expected Stacy to tell her what we were doing. 2 days before Kat was supposed to come home, at least that's what she said in that damn video, I got a call from Julie. Kat called her and told her to tell her that she was going to Boston for one last show and that Tad was paying for her airfare home. She said she would take an Uber from the airport. What's more, this extra gig would force Kat to spend another 6 days on the road. I could feel Julie cringing on the phone, trying to relay Kat's ridiculous statements. She wanted Julie to tell me that she loved me and couldn't wait to see me. For me, all thoughts of staying with Kat ended with that call. She didn't even have the guts to call me. Brad and Julie seemed so embarrassed by the whole ordeal that they distanced themselves from me immediately after that call. I knew I hadn't lost them as friends for long, just until Kat and I made a decision about our future. Stacy took charge. 2 nights after that call, Stacy and I sat in my living room watching a romantic movie. When I moved closer to her, she got nervous. I still couldn't make my move. Joey, she said affectionately. I know, and believe me, I feel it too. Over the past few weeks, my feelings for you have grown exponentially. But I'm not going to be the person to help you cheat. You might not even consider it cheating, but I can't do that. I'm falling in love with you all over again, and I want us to be together when all the dust settles. Can you understand that? I pulled her to me and rested her head against my chest. I understand, I told her sincerely. I think I want the same thing. These last few days I've been wishing I'd gone to college. I shouldn't have left you. I felt her take a deep breath and heard a snort. We sat like that for a while, immersed in our own thoughts. Can I still see you when she comes back? My tone was desperate. We can see each other as friends, she sighed. I'm hoping that this will lead to something more serious. Have you made any decisions about your relationship with Kat? It was her turn to speak in despair. I'm over her, I said firmly. But a divorce in this state takes at least 6 months. That's if she doesn't fight back. We hugged each other for a long time that night. I think we were both holding on for dear life. I'm sure Stacy was thinking the same thing I was. We were cheating right then, even though we were just cuddling. I tried to relate that to what my wife did to me. How Stacy tried to work it out, I never asked. For the next 2 days and nights, neither Stacy nor I communicated with each other. The next morning, I started calling lawyers. I ended up making an appointment with one who was recommended to me by a coworker as a shark. After initially telling my story, I asked if we could serve her in Boston. It can be done, he said with a smirk. It'll cost a little more, but we can definitely do it. We might be able to get something from Thad or his group. He did, after all, propose infidelity to a famous married woman. There's a chance it'll go nowhere, but... No, I interrupted. He's got lawyers who know a thing or two about this case. He knows it too, or he wouldn't be so brazen about it. Just pitch it to her. And oh, I want to attach this to the paperwork. And I took off my wedding ring and held it out to the man. He accepted it gleefully. Stacy was pleased that I had contacted a lawyer and started the process. But there was some hint in it that I couldn't understand. All right, Stacy, I said. Spit it out. She thought for a long minute. I don't know, she started, then stammered. I like you, Joey, and you already know that. I think it's a lot more than just liking you, and I can feel it from you too. But I don't want to start or resume our relationship with Kat and what she did to you looming over us. What are you saying? I asked, getting annoyed. Don't get upset with me, please, she replied. Those scars you have, left by those 2 bitches. I want you to get them over with and healed before we get too serious. I'll do my part to heal and show you, prove to you, that you can trust me. But I think you need to talk to Kat and try to find out why she did it. Otherwise, you won't be able to regain your self-respect and feel confident in your future decisions. She quickly changed the subject, seeing my irritation. Arguing was not her goal. Later that night, lying in bed, I tried to push her words to the back of my mind, but I couldn't shake them off. She was right. Christy was different, I told myself. I hadn't fallen in love with her yet, hadn't gotten attached. But the more I pondered, the more I realized that only time had saved me. A few more months, and who knows? Maybe things would have been much worse. Kat was much harder to explain. I knew she was strong and impulsive. Those were qualities I loved about her, but turned against me. They became deadly. As the new day dawned, I too felt lighter and more enlightened. I knew I still had a lot to do besides finalizing the divorce papers. Julie worked at a community center and tutored less fortunate children. I asked her to recommend a mental health professional or therapist for me. She knew 3 who had worked with several of the children at the center. I talked to all 3 and eventually settled on a guy named Oscar. None of my business, Joey, she said cautiously. But what led up to this? I knew what she was asking, and it didn't upset me. I'm just working on myself, I answered simply. Need to figure some things out. That got me a raised eyebrow, but also a respectful look. It was nice to see something other than pity looking back at me. The next thing I decided to do was to focus on what excuses Kat could come up with and make a plan to stop them. It won't be for the sake of argument. If I want to find out what kind of woman she is, exactly what kind of woman she is, I'm going to need a means to cut through all this nonsense. After thinking about her video and comparing her to Christy, as crazy as she is, I decided that her first line of defense would be fragile male ego. I made some notes in the journal I bought that day. When I got a little stuck, I called Stacy. "Well, you're halfway there," she exclaimed when I told her what I thought I was up against. I was surprised, I think mostly because I had finally gotten some things right about women. "You're right about ego," she said. "It's the first line of defense for modern women. Ancient women probably had it too." She giggled and cheered heartily. "The female ego," she continued. "Well, we don't call it that. It's a desire or a need. It's other things. How do you plan to react if she comes at you?" "I don't know," I said quietly. "I'm stumped." "Come on, Joey," she interrupted. "Let's pretend I'm her," she tried to change her voice. "This was the opportunity of a lifetime," she scoffed. "You can't seriously be telling me you're going to let your ego get in the way of a happy future. A lifetime of beautiful memories that we have yet to make together, just because I took an opportunity that may never come again. I know you can't look me in the eye and tell me you don't love me." "Hey, you're pretty good at that." We both laughed out loud. "Okay, give me a minute to think about it." "There you go," I said after a pause. "No. Kat, I think your ego is playing a role here. Your ego gave you permission to hurt me and break your promises to me, to go off with that nasty bastard. And you know what? His ego did too. I guess he saw your rings before you took them off and gave them to Julie. So? Just because he can carry notes and is famous gives him the right? He and you have no problem destroying relationships and marriages?" "Not bad," she said more seriously. "But you didn't answer her question, and she's going to throw it back at you like, I went because it was the chance of a lifetime. I told you I was going, and I was honest about it. I knew it would hurt your pride, but even more so your ego. I knew it would take you a while to get over it. You even got an extra week. Look at me, Joey. I don't love him. I've had a thing with, with famous people. Why can't you get over it?" That question made me engage more brain cells. We were both quiet for a while Stacy let me work out the problem. Then she encouraged me and gave me a few hints. "Joey, what made you so angry when you discovered the waitress giving the singer you know, in that back room? What feeling made you mad?" It was easy. "She was supposed to be with me," I said indignantly. "And then she just left with him." "Okay," she said cautiously. "Maybe, but what about this? She left you unattended, but she also spoke disparagingly of you, insulted you, and might have humiliated you if she'd been caught. Is that true?" "Yes," I replied quietly, not wanting to relive the event again. "So her ego took precedence over yours," she continued. "Her needs too. Her desires. It's a common thread. Kat will use the video to throw you off balance. Hey, I told you so is how she'll frame it. Stop worrying about your feelings, yourself, and let's focus on mine. On my needs and wants, because that's what really matters." "I guess so," I replied tiredly and frustrated. "Think about it," she said. "Maybe sleep on it." I told her I was seeing a counselor, and her mood seemed to improve. Sleep came almost immediately after my head touched the pillow. Over the next few days, I talked to Brad and got his opinion. He would divorce the bitch. That was his only position. I talked to Julie and my sister. Elena was a strange person. She thought I should try to forgive her and move on with my life. That told me a lot about Elena, but it didn't make me love her any less. It was helpful to hear her counter-argument to Stacy. She was unhappy that Stacy and I were spending time together. When I pointed out what my wife was doing, she only sighed and said she hoped I wouldn't be too hard on Kat and that I would stop seeing Stacy when my wife returned. It took less than 20 minutes to realize that I didn't like Oscar at all. Fortunately, the next day I was able to make another appointment with a woman named Lydia. She turned out to be the most responsive. When she asked what I wanted to accomplish, I told her I would never make a mistake like that with a woman again. "What do you think is wrong with you?" Her question caught me off guard. I don't know," I replied, stammering. "Maybe I have some repressed problem from my childhood that manifests itself and causes me to be attracted to hurtful, self-centered women." "Ah," Lydia laughed hard. "Maybe it's just your mediator that's broken." And we both laughed. After that, I found it very easy to talk to Lydia. She encouraged me, but also spared no words. In the end, it came down to asking the right questions while the relationship was developing, coming up with hypothetical situations and then playing the what-if game. If only I had known it was that simple. I felt so much better. A call to my attorney confirmed that they were ready to serve her with a subpoena right before the concert in Boston. The people at the apartment office weren't too happy that we had terminated our lease early, but I didn't care. I started boxing up our belongings, hers and mine, to make the process easier. Stacy and I role-played a few more times over the phone. The night before Kat was due back, I knew she had already been served. Stacy and I talked on the phone for 4.5 hours. Most of that time we talked about the future, not my soon-to-be ex-wife. I slept, with hope for the future. Strangely, I felt so good that my future was bright with or without Stacy. I was going to take my time with her. There was no way I wanted to go through something like that again. When I got home from work, Kat was sitting at the kitchen table. She had half a glass of red wine in her hands and an empty bottle next to her. She just looked up at me without saying a word. "Look who made it home!" I couldn't help myself. All the rage came back in an instant. Nothing could have prepared me for seeing her there. "How could you do that?" she asked, twisting her words slightly. "Funny," I replied quickly. "That should have been my question." She tried to speak through me. "It's not going to happen tonight," I stated, raising my hand. "You're drunk or halfway there, probably feeling about the same as I did in the early days. I'm not getting the answers I need right now. We'll talk tomorrow if you sober up. You need to start thinking about where you're going to live." I headed for the stairs to change into something comfortable. Her condition I hadn't expected, though I should have. Dinner was waiting for me at the pub, I decided. I wasn't going to listen to her poor me ramblings. When I got back at 11, Kat was asleep in our bed, the former bed. I went to the spare room and got ready for bed. I got everything ready for Kat's arrival. Then I texted Stacy, "Good night." She replied, wanting to know how it went, but I didn't feel like talking about it. Especially didn't feel like typing. I told her we would discuss it the next time we saw each other. At that moment, I was haunted by the thought of whether I wanted another relationship. It wasn't that Stacy wasn't attractive enough. She was, but I knew what was in store for Kat and me. The next night, Kat was a completely different person. I was already alerted to the fact that she was talking to Julie. Brad had told me about it. Elena also called to berate me about the divorce papers. I told her to shut up. My marriage was over and I wasn't going to change my mind. My favorite dinner was on the table, and Kat looked like she'd been cleaning the house all day in addition to cooking. She was dressed in her favorite tight top and jeans. Again, no words except hi. I examined the meatloaf. Kat made a sour face. "No, I didn't poison it," she snorted, though it had crossed my mind. "Sit down," I commanded. She wasn't used to me talking to her like that. I think she went to the fridge to get me a beer, just out of spite. "Now I'm not drunk," she said, as I tentatively tasted my food. "But my question remains the same. As I understand it, I began, remembering what she'd asked the night before. Our marriage has broken up, but I have questions, and I think you at least owe me an explanation. Can we not start with that, please? She wasn't begging, she was pleading. I know you have questions. I'll answer them all, completely and honestly. I don't want a divorce. I want to talk things out, to understand your feelings and what we need to do to move forward. I didn't respond or react to anything. After a long pause, setting my fork aside, I started again. What could you have been thinking about going with them? It was pretty simple. As I said in my video, she answered without hesitation, clearly prepared for the question. It was the opportunity of a lifetime. I didn't think about exactly what it was. I just had to do it. It was a wonderful experience, and now it's over. I even got to use some of my marketing skills, which was unexpected. Yeah, I spat. Was that before or after you spent time on your back in his bed? She ignored the remark. Joey, she continued, reliving her amusement. When Julie and I ended up on the other side of the stage, we were there with several women. As I said, I was one of 6 invited to continue touring with them. As you probably know, there were 4 concerts in the first 10 days. At each concert, new female fans joined the band and others left. There were 6 in Cleveland and 10 in Ann Arbor. I didn't keep track after that, but we were busy. I grinned sarcastically. She wasn't going to hold back. We did social media posts most of the day. On those nights when there were no shows, we accompanied the band to social events, pre-scheduled gigs at nightclubs and high-end restaurants. During the day, we went to places booked by the band's management. One day, we visited the Cleveland Zoo. Lots of posing and hundreds of photos for various fan pages. Before the 3rd gig, I told Thad about my marketing degree and some ideas on how to improve his visibility during these shows. How to improve his visibility and image. I told him about how to organize live broadcasts at these events that would look like they were happening from a fan's perspective. He put me in touch with the band manager, who put me in touch with the marketing team, and that's why I stayed for 9 days. Great, I spat. Now he has virtual groupies instead of real ones. Now the damage is done. I didn't care. It was time to get to the main point. How many times have you actually entertained this asshole? I asked, fully charged. Kat stared at me intently. It took all her strength not to lash out at me. It was written all over her face. Finally, taking a deep breath, she replied. What the hell, Joey? She said, in a half-questioning, half-cry. I just told you about everything I've been doing for the last 3 weeks. What we've been doing was pointless, and only 4 times. Well, for your information, doing it isn't one of my top 5 moments on tour, and wasn't even considered when I decided to go. Yes, Kat, sex, I said coldly. And yes, that's what's important to me. That's the part that jeopardized our marriage, broke your vows, and showed your lack of respect and love. And you didn't answer the question, I noticed. I could see that she wanted to avoid the discussion or what I had asked her. In her mind, everything was wrapped up in a nice little gift box. She tried to tie a bow, and I ruined her nice prepared soliloquy. Humbled, she decided to act directly. I told you so, she declared. That was 4 times. She finished in a tone similar to, Are you happy now? Well, we already have a problem, I replied, because I don't believe you, and it's unlikely I ever will. But let's get on with it. What was your plan? I continued. To get your husband back on board after you returned? After all, you already know me well enough? Or thought you did? She seemed to be prepared for that too. I figured that if you loved me and because I told you there would be no, what did you call it? Getting you back on board. I planned to show you how much I love you, shower you with affection, and a little more, you know. The stupid bitch was trying so hard to hide her guilt that she couldn't even say the word. What makes you think I'd even want to have, you know, with you? It was a direct hit, but we weren't playing Battleship. The anger that gripped me was due to the fact that I hadn't properly vetted her as a life partner. Joey, She acted as usual and sounded puzzled. For heaven's sake, I'm not damaged goods. You can have fun with me. I'm your wife. I realize I've hurt you in ways I haven't considered, and in some cases I have, but apparently not to this extent. We can get past this. I'm not trying to sound cliched or make excuses. I'm trying to tell you that I'm the same person I've always been. It's wrong to say? Yes, it's discomforting, I said flatly. You think that because I don't think that. I'm telling you right now, getting through it isn't going to work. Please, Joey, you can make it stop, she sobbed weakly. I came home fully prepared to devote the rest of my life to you, just like I did before the concert. Or at least that was my plan until you forced me into service. I can't do that, Kat, I told her sternly. You're right about love. I can't just turn it off. However, I've lost all my trust in you, all my faith. That's what happens when one partner is unfaithful. Besides, any shred of respect you had left for me would be gone if I took you back. All those necessary pillars have crumbled, and what we had is left in ruins. Is this all because of your high school girlfriend? She asked, holding back her fury. Elena told me you dated her while I was away. Rich, I grinned. But since you asked, the answer is no. It was actually my sister who brought her here the night after the concert, I guess to try to cheer me up. I'm not going to lie. We may have something in our future, but we both agree that I have to decide what to do with this relationship first. Then it's about her, Kat replied with a low growl. She's waiting in the wings. How noble of her. Be honest, if you hadn't reunited with her, you wouldn't even be thinking about divorce. My mood lifted dramatically. There was a long pause as I struggled to regain even breathing. It also gave me time to figure out her weak argument designed to deflect attention away from her actions. Kat, I said softly and evenly, listen to me. You gutted me the minute you decided to leave with the group. Gutted me, do you understand? Even if I had decided in those 3 weeks to stay and try to work things out, things would never have been the same between us again. The sex you had with them gave me goosebumps, I continued. But honestly, that's the least of our problems once I was able to think rationally. You helped with that, by the way, by staying with them for an extra week. That's all the things I've said before about these pillars. You say you're going to stay here, forever, and fix everything. The problem is that I can never will, believe that. In fact, if I stayed with you, I think that act alone would give you an excuse to lose your way again. There's nothing left for us here, Kat. If we ever had a relationship like this, I don't think you could go with it, or I wouldn't care. Kat, I really do care, and you certainly went. I expected her to go on, but Catherine looked defeated. Her shoulders slumped during my tirade. I was a little disappointed and at the same time glad that I hadn't been able to use my male ego speech. From the look of her, she didn't have anything else to say or do. Kat, I said, now unemotional. Read the papers, get a lawyer's advice, and sign them. I've been very fair. No matter what you do, I've given you notice, so neither of us can stay here longer than 10 days. I didn't box up our stuff for some trick. I'll help you if you need it, but let's just get this over with. Something like a moan or a sob escaped her lips. Then came quiet sobs. Usually the only person who could comfort her was the one standing right in front of her, but not now. She realized it too, running off to the bedroom. 2 nights later, when I got home, there was no dinner, just Kat and an almost empty house. I'm sorry, Joey, she said seriously. I'm sorry for everything. There's no hope for us, is there? It was a strange question to which I knew she knew the answer. No, Kat. I've been busy moving all my stuff out of here, she said after a deep sigh. I signed the papers. She pointed to the counter where we were charging phones and putting away mail. I was offered and accepted a job with the Green River Band as director of internet media, she said proudly. I will always love you. I know you believe you're doing what's best for you, maybe for us, and maybe you are. I wanted to tell you this face to face, like I should have at the concert. I'm leaving tonight and spending the night at your sister's. I hope you find what you're looking for and have an amazing life. Same to you, Kat. I said as she hugged me. It would be our last hug. Next chapter. I married Stacy, and we'd been together for 23 years. Where the hell does the time go? She walked in the door as I was making dinner. We alternated cooking and had gotten used to cooking for 4 instead of 5. Our oldest, Eric, had just gone to Notre Dame. The other two, another boy and a younger girl, were in high school and doing just fine. Stacy put the magazine on the counter where our phones were usually charged and our mail lay. I think all couples have this in common. She looked at me, and I immediately knew she had bought it for me. I would have waited to see what it was, but as I walked by, I noticed a picture of Catherine, and apparently she was being interviewed by Rolling Stone magazine. My thoughts wandered as I worked on the roast meat. I returned home the evening after Kat and I had talked and hugged one last time, dreading another conversation and attempt to win my heart back. I honestly admitted to her that my heart didn't lie toward that. Instead, I discovered that everything in the house was missing that belonged to her, and there was a letter lying in the center of our kitchen table. Joey, I've been thinking hard about what you said. Thanks for talking to me, by the way. Some of it made me look inside myself, and it wasn't pleasant. I don't pretend to understand men and their thinking. The whole thing is damaged goods. Women worry about their men falling in love. However, something you said made me think. It spoke to the fact that there was at least some intentionality to it and that I would be very inclined to do it again. It made me wonder if I really wanted to be married. After much deliberation, I gave you my answer and gave you your freedom. I know we were heading towards this anyway, but I decided not to delay. You were right, and unfortunately, I don't think I know myself well enough. I definitely shouldn't get into a serious relationship. But I'm still sad, because despite what you probably think, I love you and always will. Love, Kat. That was the end of it. She called me the following week to let me know that she was contracted for a new job and was accepted. She gave me her new phone number and said she would text me where to send the money from the property division when the divorce was final. I gave her my information so she could sign the papers. Stacy and I started going on dates as soon as it became clear that Kat had indeed left and taken that job. Things got even more heated when my attorney informed me that she had signed the papers. Stacy and I decided not to rush things. She, like me, feared a classic comeback, and I feared my inability to read and understand women in general. However, we found inventive ways to cope. We talked. We talked about everything and everyone, baring our souls. It became a game, something fun. We never got angry when the other didn't understand us. We were patient and caring. It took our relationship to new heights. Stacy and I married 2 years after our divorce was finalized, but by then, we both knew deep down that it was the right thing to do. Marriage was a foregone conclusion. That night, we finally had intercourse. It was amazing. Things only got better from there. When people try to describe true love, they use the standard phrase, "I'm willing to die for my spouse." I had something different, something better. Over the years, my worst nightmares have been about losing Stacy. They ranged from a car accident to some kind of illness, and the magnitude of that loss always made me wake up covered in sweat. Strangely, these dreams never included her leaving me for someone else. Stacy highlighted a few specific paragraphs from Kat's interview. After the Green River Band, she took a job with another up-and-coming local band and helped it achieve fame. A dozen years later, Kat worked with Aerosmith, then Journey. She was very well known and respected in the music industry. Interviewer: with all the success you've had, can you think of any regrets? Kat: only 2. As you know, I was briefly married, to a wonderful man, and never remarried. My second regret is that because of this crazy business, I didn't have time for other love affairs. My first and biggest regret is that because of my selfishness, I hurt and stole my only husband. Thanks to old acquaintances, I know he has a wonderful woman and family, and I am very happy for him. I know we could have been together, and I often wonder if I made the right decisions back then. Interviewer. Well, on behalf of the entire music industry, we are very grateful that you made your choice. After the highlighted portion, Stacy added a handwritten message. Her loss was always my gain, you sweet man. I love you. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, so subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.